Welcome back, folks, for a new episode of Leaked. And today we'll cover the Object 268, variant number 5. This is going to be a special tier 10 Russian tank destroyer. So it's a T-10 with a larger turret and a Russian 152, but design-wise, it's not that sophisticated because you are reusing the same old chassis from a tank that's already in the game with a different turret and a different gun, but it's like the IS-3A or the M46 Patton KR. So you're already recycling the same old chassis, just adding a different turret. So half your work is already done from taking the game's same resource. So whatever. But this vehicle is likely going to be a Clan Wars based reward rather than a personal mission based reward because the stats are too sucky to compete against the Object 260 for the second season of personal missions. So trust me on it, it's not likely going to be a personal mission based reward. And you really don't want it because the stats are just that bad. So we'll see, but trust me on it. But let's take a look at the history of the T-10 and the Object 268. So the description of this vehicle is 152 tank destroyer based design on the T-10 chassis due to substantial costly modifications required to the T-10 hull for the larger turret ring, and the gun. The project was suspended in the design phase. So Russians do what Russians do. So they take a heavy tank and try to add a larger caliber gun to it and make it a tank destroyer the same way they did to the KV chassis, making it Su-152, and taking the IS chassis, making the ISU-152, and they took the IS-3 chassis, make it the Object 704. They took the T-10 chassis, make it Object 268. So that's what the Russians do, but there are 5 variants of the Object 268. You have one experimental prototype developed and built, and that's the one in Kubinka, or the current regular Object 268. So there was one produced, but there are 4 other variants. So those were blueprints, if you will, but I cannot find the blueprints of the other 3, so that sucks. But yeah, tank destroyers and heavy tanks at this time in late 1950s and early 1960s were becoming obsolete. So yeah, it's kind of pointless to have large vehicles with rolled homogeneous steel armor, and that could easily be defeated with large penetration guns from 100mm or 115mm on the T-54, 55s, or T-62s. And later on, you have the missile firing 125mm on the T-64s and T-72s. So your armor means nothing. And with the developments of missiles and shape charge high explosive anti-tanks and high penetration AP CRs or APDS or AP fence stabilized discarding sabots, you're not going to stand up against those high penetration with your heavy tanks. So heavy tanks became obsolete. Tank destroyers became obsolete because medium tanks could do the same job. So yep, that's the result of your tank destroyer based on heavy tank chassis. Just know. So the T-10 was the original Object 730. It was the IS-5, but later on they modified the turret, modified the gun, became IS-8, and renamed to the IS-9 after a few more minor modifications, then IS-10, and renamed to the T-10 because the fall of Stalin and de-Stalinization. So that's the T-10 heavy tank, and this is the final heavy tank of the Soviet Union, ending the KV and IS series. So originally you have the KV-1s into a bunch of KV tanks to the KV-13, KV-85, which got shifted to the IS design, which became IS-1, IS-2, all the way up to the IS-10, and then came the T-10. So there is no T-11 or T-12. Nope. So last heavy tank of the Soviet Union. This vehicle was based on the IS-3 with a longer hull, 7 pairs of road wheels rather than 6, I believe. Upgraded 122 with fuel extractor, larger turret, improved diesel engine, thicker armor, more ammunition capacity for the 122, and assigned to independent tank regiments and battalions, so like the IS series, and performs the same role like the IS tanks, so breakthroughs, major offensive, supporting infantry, heavy tank-ish, and destroy bunkers, building fortifications, static weapons, soft targets, fuel trucks, stuff like that. Estimated 2,500 T-10s were built, but they were never put into service. Now, some people say that T-10s were used in the Six-Day War in the Middle East, but there are no pictures of destroyed T-10s. So there are only pictures of destroyed IS-3s, not of T-10s. So more evidence are required to demonstrate the export of this vehicle. So the fall of heavy tanks and super heavy tank concepts became very prominent after World War II because during World War II, there were two types of combat heavy armored vehicles. Armored vehicles. One was support infantry, which is basically your heavy tanks, so heavy infantry tanks, and then your light/medium tanks, which were designed for cavalry, so cruiser tanks. So basically two types of vehicles, and the multiple problems surfaced during the first half of the war. So infantry tanks with armor lagged behind fast armorless cavalry tanks, so cruiser tanks. Fast-paced and not like the snail crawl from the trench warfare of World War I. So you need to have fast tanks and a lot of action-packed battlefield, so you need to move around quickly. Cruiser tanks were very susceptible to anti-tank guns and infantry weapons like bazookas or anti-material rifles. Tank destroyers were developed from combat tank chassis, often faced problems of unable to find targets and attacked by infantry. So basically, you need to find targets first to destroy them. And tank destroyers were on and off, so to speak, so not that effective. So during the Cold War, heavy tanks suffered major severe drawbacks, like heavy in weight caused damage to railroads, bridges, your own railways, and roads, so not that great. Expensive to build compared to smaller medium tanks, so less resource. And just as susceptible to artillery, mines, infantry-armed AT weapons, and various other explosives, so basically just as weak. And development and widespread usage of high-penetration shells like high-explosive anti-tank, APCR, APDS, APF, blah, blah, blah. So basically your heavy armor means nothing. And developments and wide use of AT missiles. So basically missiles became a prominent anti-tank weapon. So why have a large target and without armor, technically? So you're just going to get penetrated and explode. So that's the fall of heavy tanks as well as tank destroyers based on it. So that's why you don't see a lot of Object 268 variant number 5 these days. So the main rise of main battle tank, or universal tanks, as the British called them, was because the development of high penetration weaponry from the high explosive anti-tank and the missiles. And you have advancements in armor protection, such as composite armor and reactive armor. So you don't need to have a large slab of rolled homogeneous steel armor. So basically a smaller armor, but just as effective at bouncing shells and not penetrating shells or deflecting shells. And you have better engine, better transmission, protection from nuclear, biological, and chemical contaminated battlefield. So you need to have all these factors to be a fast, effective main battle tank. So basically, heavy tanks were too slow and they became obsolete. So armor is easily overmatched, and firepower could be matched by main battle tanks, so basically pointless. Tank destroyers, advancements in weapon technology allows main battle tanks to do the same job. So why have tank destroyers? Light tanks, on and off, because armor fighting vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, APCs, airborne helicopters performs the same scouting duties And currently, there are no light tanks because you just use drones to spot for you, right? So, no point of having light tanks. And after the Vietnam War, some US generals argued that the main battle tanks could be replaced by attack helicopters because the jungle and the swamps. So, just use helicopters and bomb the crap out of them. So, that's their theory. But as you can see, the factors of leading up to the main battle tanks are that heavy tanks are just too slow and too fat of a target. And even if you have a 152 millimeter large caliber gun, a smaller main battle tank with 100 millimeter or 115 millimeter could easily defeat the same amount of armor that your large caliber gun would do. So, kind of pointless. But that's the whole development and why the Object 268 never came out. So that's why it's currently residing in a tank museum. So no more tank destroyers, no more heavy tanks. Oh well. But here is the blueprint of this vehicle. So I cannot find the 3 other variants blueprints, but I tried, trust me. But as you can see, it's basically IS-8, IS-10, T-10 with larger turret, and the Russian 152. Now this muzzle brake looks like the one you find on the Object 263, the open top 130 millimeter, but you'll see in the HD pictures. So here is the HD render of this vehicle. So notice the crazy multi-port muzzle brake of this weapon. Looks a lot like the 130, right? But this is a larger barrel because it's 152. So, okay. You still have the crazy looking rangefinder that's found on the regular Object 268. It's a Russian cannon. And the turret is a lot larger than the regular turret on the IS-8 or T-10. Keep calling it the IS-8. Getting used to it. Notice the KPV, large caliber machine gun. So it's even bigger than the Dushka. This is 14.5 millimeter, I believe. It's the same caliber that's used on the PTRS 41, I believe, the large caliber anti-material rifle that you see a lot of Russian troops shooting at Panzer IIIs, just like pfft. That's the same caliber for this machine gun. It's a large ass machine gun. So the 50 cal is 12.7. This is 14.5. It's a big ass machine gun. So basically the hull looks exactly like the IS-8, the T-10 in the game. So kind of disappointed about the hull design, but well, historically it is the same hull, but it's the whole tank concept is just bleh. I mean, you already have the same hull. Oh well. And here are the HD in-game screenshots of this vehicle. So basically a large heavy tank that performs like a tank destroyer, so like a T-30 for the Russians. You still have the splashboard for the driver. Huh. And here are the early models of this vehicle. And here are the collision models of this tank. So as you can see, I produced a few labels, but the frontal armor is about 210 to 245 millimeters effective if you don't slope it, if you don't angle it. The lower plate is about 186.9. So it's a tier 10 though, but armor is pretty much pointless for tier 10 heavy tanks, so this armor is just not going to bounce shots compared to the IS-7. Oh well. The cupola rim is about 200 to 230 millimeter rounded, so you can see right here that the back of the cupola is still pretty thick, but the rangefinder is still the weak spot, so shooting at the rangefinder will penetrate. Also note, the top of the turret looks pretty weak, so it looks like 30 to 40 millimeters, and what that means is it could easily overmatch by 90 caliber guns plus. So a lot of tanks at tier 9 and tier 10 have larger caliber guns and easily overmatch your roof armor on the turret. So that's a big weak spot. All right. The turret cheeks are pretty good. 230 millimeter rounded, so that will bounce. Mantlet is 200 millimeter with armor underneath, so will bounce shots. But the weak spot is the top of the turret. So yeah. Turret side is 90 millimeter, and turret rear is 60 millimeter rounded. Now, the hull armor is slightly different than the in-game T10. So you can see that the space armor and this little cheek is different in values. So it's a little bit different. Notice the space armor? It's a little bit different. So slightly different hull. Oh my god, shocking. But it's still the same values for most of it. So side armor, as you can see, will bounce a few shots, but if you angle it, you do have the space armor on the sides, like the T10. So overall, this armor is basically less or not as well protected as the T10 at tier 9 because the turret has big weak spots on top and it's a larger target. So, oh well. And here are the main stats of this vehicle. So it's going to be a special tier 10 Russian tank destroyer. And there should be a crew of 5, I'm guessing, because the extra loader for the gun. But the original amount of crew is 4 for the T10 at tier 9. So it's about 4 to 5 crew. Should have normal matchmaking because it's tier 10. There's no gold costs. It's a special tank. Health is 1,900. Slightly below average, but whatever. Engine power is 750, weighs about 50 tons. The horsepower per ton ratio is pretty good, 15. Top speed is pretty good, 48. Reverse is 15, so that's also good. Hull traverse is 20 degrees per second, so that's a little bit below average. So you can judge the values based on the shading of the red. So turret traverse is 15.6 degrees per second. I think that's the lowest turret traverse speed out of all vehicles in the game. 15.6. I mean, the Tiger has like 18. Same goes for the KV2. Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's like really, really bad. Alright, terrain resistance is 1.726 for hard, 1.918 for medium, and 2.493 for soft. That's bad. That's really bad. View range is 360 meters. Bad. That's tier 8 heavy tank standard. The regular tier 9 T10 has 400 meters of view range. You're telling me that with a bigger turret and better periscopes, hopefully you have less view range. Radio range is 720. Hull armor is 120 at the front, 90 at the sides, 50 at the rear. Turret armor is 230 at the front, 90 at the sides, 60 at the rear. So, yeah. The gun is 152 and 53. Ammo count should be around 20 to 25, I'm guessing. So the T10 has 30, 122 loaded. The Object 268 with the superstructure and fighting compartment has 35, 152. Now, based on the turret shape and the reduced size compared to the non-traversable, non-turreted Object 268, I'm guessing it's about 20 to 25 amount of ammo carry. Fires AP, high explosive anti-tank, and high explosive. Penetration is above average, 303, and 395 for both AP and high explosive anti-tank, so that's pretty good. Damage is 750, so slightly below average, but it's about the same ballpark compared to the T30s and T110E4s and T110E3s and the Object 268. So, okay. Rate of fire is 3.082 rounds per minute. That's bad. That's really bad. That's worse than the T30, I believe. DPM is 2,300. Okay. Reloads every 19.466 seconds Accuracy is 0.36. 4. Oh, aim time is 2.88 seconds. Gun depression is 5 degrees. Elevation should be around 12 to 15 degrees. So, yep. Now you can see why the stats are so poopy. Ugh. So final thoughts and opinions. It's basically a T30 version of a T10. It's an awful tank destroyer. Awful. It could pass for a heavy tank, but you don't have armor for a heavy. So basically the strength is the fully traversable turret. The horsepower per ton ratio is a plus, but not that big of a plus. So, okay. Weaknesses, horrid, terrible terrain resistance, traverse, gun characteristics, and view range. So basically everything else. So it's close to a Russian version of a T110E4 that has better horsepower per ton ratio and a real turret at the cost of everything else like gun performance, view range, armor. Oof. So unless artificially inflated, should have less ammo count to the real Object 268 due to eternal size from the superstructure and turret and stuff. So is it worth it? Nope. Get the Object 907 if you can, the M48A2 hybrid, or anything else like the IS-5 if you can, but it's a horrible tank destroyer. Terrible. It could pass for a heavy tank. Could. But the traverse is just, you're not going to brawl with this vehicle. No. So tank destroyers are all about DPM. So all tank destroyers have DPM. This vehicle has less DPM than the tier 7 tank destroyers. Yep. Just not worth it. So why a T10 with a larger gun? Why not these vehicle? So here is the SU-152P, not the ISU-152. It's a SU-152P. It has the same gun as this vehicle. It's basically a Waffenträger for the Russians. So interesting, right? It's a different design. So it's basically a Russian Waffenträger, Panzer IV-ish of a tank, but still has a large caliber gun. So here is the SU-152 Taran. It's basically the Russian version of the FE-215B 1A3. This is a very long caliber, or long barrel, 152. So, yeah, Russian FE. Here is the Object 327. This is based on the T-72 chassis, but the concept is a fully traversable tank destroyer with a large caliber gun. So this might be too exotic for World of Tanks, but it is based on the T-72 chassis, so yep. Did T-72 have composite armor? I don't remember, but it's pretty well sloped at the front. And finally, why not a T-10 with a larger caliber gun? This is the best largest caliber gun for a Russian-based chassis. It's the M1978 Coxswain. It is Korean of origin, so basically they took the Type 59, modified it with a 170mm. This is artillery. I really want this vehicle as a tank destroyer. It's like playing with the Jagdpanzer E100 on a T-54 chassis and just go to town. Oh my, this is such a barbaric vehicle. Feels like, caveman-ish, but still powerful. Ugh. So obsolete in the current era of weapon warfare, but just whatever. I want one. And if only I could I cannot do this pun. Putin. It's Putin. The other three variants of the Object 268, that would be amazing, but I cannot find these three blueprints, so that kind of sucks, but there you go, folks. The Object 268, rare number 5. Is it really worth it? Not really. Is it really interesting? Not really. So give me the Coxswain, give me the 327. I wish, but Oh well. There you go, Roy. There you go. A lot of Russian heavy tanks. Let's count them. If you consider this as a heavy tank, there should be 14 premium slash special Russian heavy tanks, including the KV-4 KTTS. So that's quite a lot. But thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.